Started on February last year, and yeah, as you can see, it didn't take me too long to make, and which is what I usually find. I find my best tracks are the ones that I just bang out in a couple of days maximum. Let's begin. So yeah, as you can see, this took me 12 hours. So I think the thing you're going to take away from this track is, if you've heard it before, it did really well. I was so pleased with how it did, considering it's a really simple track. So there's not a lot of elements to it, but that sort of adds to how the drop is so powerful, and the breakdown is pretty minimal, as you'll see. But yeah, I'll play it through for you now. Can I play? Here we go. Dylan, I'm going through Supreme. And I'm also going to be going through Wild West, which is an unreleased tune, but it's a heavy sort of bass tune. Fast forward it a little bit. Right, so you get the idea. Hopefully you've all heard it before, if you're here and want to know how it's made. I presume you have. But I'll start on probably what I would have started on first, which is the drums. I always start by laying down some sort of drums before I make a drop. So in this case, I would have done a kick, clap, hi-hat, just a little loop, and then I would have gone and made the drop, and then I go back and I fill up the rest of the track. So yeah, so the kick and the clap, as you can see, I've had to render it out already, but it was probably made out of 3 or 4 layers, and I get most of my samples from Vengeance, which is what I highly recommend if you haven't already. Their packs are so good because they're just really usable. Okay, here we go. So yeah, this clap is probably made out of 4 or 5 samples from Vengeance and Splice as well, which you can just hear here, which... Oh my god, the automation stuff. I don't know, the clap's weird, but yeah, it is just a couple of claps layered, and what I'll do every single time pretty much is I'll just EQ those and I'll compress them with a sausage fattener, and that's what you'll see throughout this project. This was like the peak of... Just pick CPU and food, this is fine. Yeah, okay, that's all good then. But yeah, you'll see throughout this project I use sausage fattener a lot, and I have to be honest, I wouldn't do that now, but the sort of principle's still there. So sausage fattener is basically a limiter, sort of, and then when you push it really hard, it just saturates the drums as well. So as you'll see, the clap is completely crushed, which is why it sounds so powerful. And I think I've done it on the kick as well. So this kick is decaps, that's just from Splice, and it's just got some basic EQs, taking out some of the lows. And then OTT, again, I don't know why I did that at the time, but it probably just pushed it harder to counteract with the clap, because that was so heavy. You need then a heavy kick to balance that out. I've then just got a sausage fattener, like nothing happened, nothing changed to it, but that's just brick wall limiting it. So without it, you'll see it like it will slightly clip, which you don't want. But by putting a sausage on it as well, you control it slightly. And then after I've done that, I have taken out, so here, this is where the sub hits. So the sub throughout the whole tune is just an E. So all you do is just take out, all I've done anyway, is take out that frequency so it doesn't clash. I can't remember if I've actually sidechained on this project, but usually I wouldn't. Especially at this time, I wasn't really a fan of it. So I've just taken that out so it doesn't clash. When you use sausage fattener, do you use gain compensation? Really, I just use my ears. So when you use a sausage fattener, you made it loud anyway. And then you can, as you can see, I've probably gone through So this kick, for example, after I put the sausage fattener on, was too loud, and then you can just see I've just taken it back a little bit. So as I'm going, I'll mix as I go, and then if I feel like it's gone a bit too loud, I'll just take it down. But generally, I have my kick at 0 dB, just going, and then I'll arrange everything else around that kick. So yeah, so that's a kick. Just got some automation as well. Although I don't think it's working at the moment. But yeah, automation just to take out the lows as it comes into the drop, which just adds to the power. What else we got? Halfway through the drop, this hi-hat comes in, which is 2 layered up. And these are probably Vengeance, yeah. Oh, so difficult, 1 minute. I think it's because I've got some on the master. Oh, did I? Right, I'll leave that then. The hi-hats I just literally put together and I process them just in the same way as each other. So one of them is the main one. And then underneath that you've got another one, which is just taking out so this one's doing the high and it's got the nice attack to it. And then this one behind it is slightly longer and it adds more of a tail. So you haven't got the highs in that one and you've got the highs in this one. So when I'm layering drums, I don't want 2 of them to do exactly the same thing. You're layering for a purpose, I think. So, and then on here you can see I've probably done the same thing as I do now. I've just taken out a little bit here, which is like a frequency that was just sounding harsh. If you get Pro Q2, you can listen to this by pressing this here. And when you're going through that, you can literally pinpoint frequencies that just hurt your ears. And I've just taken it out there and then boosted a little bit in the high end, just to counteract that cut that I made. How do you start out the track? Like your drums first, bass, and do you always start with a drop when making a song? In this case, yeah, I find that I'm strongest at making drops. My musical knowledge actually isn't very good, like theory-wise, so I rely on samples and the drop to really stand for the tune. And my breakdowns are usually really simple and sample-based, which I find easiest to just come back to eventually when I've got a vibe from the drop. So every time I'll start with the drums, even if I end up changing them out eventually, I'll just get a basic layer down, and then I'll sound design for a bit, and just see really where it takes me, and then I'll come back, work on an intro and a build up, and then that's 90% of the whole track, and then the last 10% is going through and making sure that everything sounds great together, which usually takes the longest out of everything. Decimal does. I was just about to go through that. Do you press every layer of your clap differently, or do you put your layers all in one channel? So you're going to see that I try and keep everything, because my computer's not amazing. I literally just bust everything together. So I've sent all my claps to one thing. You'll see in the next project better, because the claps aren't rendered out or anything, so I can just go through that properly. But I'll literally put them all to the same bus and I'll process them all together, because I find that way you're not risking the fact they're not going to glue together. If they're all compressed together and they're all EQ'd together, they're going to sound really glued together. So as you can see, 4 claps here just sounds like 1. And you've got a little one here, which is just adding some lows on the other hit. Just emphasising that hit a little bit. So decimal, which I was about to talk about, I always put on my hats, which is basically there you go. It's basically like a bit crusher, and you can do loads to it. So when you load it up, you'll have this setting, and you can just go through all of them. But I love the 909 hat setting, so I'll show you with and without. It just adds so much attack and life to the hats. So this is without, and this is with. So even though it's quite subtle, it just makes it punchier the mix a little bit more. Along with that, do you compress all your drums together with a glue compressor? Do you sound design for each track as you go? Do you ever sound design sessions? Using 808 sub. I'll get to the sub and everything. I'm just going to go through the drums first, and then I'll work onto that. But sound design wise, I'll It depends. I'll usually go out with the intent to start a track, and then if it's just not working, I'll just save the sound design that I've done, and then hopefully in the future I can come back to it and just hopefully reuse it. But like, I find if I'm forcing a tune too much, I don't try and like continue and go with it. If it just comes naturally, that's usually the best time to then continue making the track, and focus on everything, not just sound design. So yeah, that's the hats, and then you've got a little one here, just a little closed hat, which is panned a little bit, just to add some like more interest to the sides, because everything is essentially mono in this drum section. And then all together, even though it's really subtle, it just adds a bit of swing. So I pushed it a little bit so it swung, and it just adds to like the vibe, and it gets you through to the next 4 bars. So, and it just prepares you for that next section. Essentially, that's all the drums. It's just literally a kick, a clap, and a couple of hi-hats, with some layers. What's this one here? This is just another layer, although it might not even be on. Yeah, so as you can see, it's just really simple, and I think that's like the thing that I've learned from this track is going back through it, even though it's not exactly how I do it now, the simplicity of it was probably what made it as good as it came out as. What's your approach in terms of mixing levels for kick and snare, drums, perks, bass, vocals? Do you have a standard go-to for your levels? The elements to reach you. The thing with loudness is it completely depends, even though it might appear loud when you look at it, if it's compressed differently or it's like really crushed, the fact that it's loud doesn't actually mean it's loud. So I just recommend having something you focus around your mix. So the kick, for example, you'll just have 0 dB, and then just try and use your ears, and you can usually gauge on that. But a pattern usually shows, so I'll usually have my kick at 0, my clap will probably be at around 0 -1, and my hat will be like slightly lower. But again, it just changes every time. Do you have custom racks that you use in your perk symbols? Yeah, so sometimes now, not at the time because this was made so long ago, but now if I was just starting, I would load up all my drums and I'd go through, and I've got a few here that I just go to. So this one, for example, this is all from the Night Controller. If you know that track, I found that I process stuff pretty well in that one compared to a lot of tracks. So that's the one I usually go to, and it just loads up all the plugins, even if it's not exactly the same. It's a good base to start from, and then you can just work from that, and it just saves so much time. No worries. I hope that helped. And yeah, so that's literally the drums. Further along, there's a ride as well, which I do pretty much in every tune. I love like having a really tight hi-hat and then something layered underneath, which just makes the energy so much like higher. So like without the ride, and then with the ride, it just adds like another aspect to the track which isn't in the first drop. And I found as the sound design is pretty repetitive, I had to rely on that just to change up the second drop slightly. So that takes through literally the whole of the second drop, and that's processed slightly differently. Again, you've got a decimal on it, on the 909 hat setting, just adding a bit more life to it. A Pro Q, so again, just taking out some frequencies that I didn't want, but no real boosting anywhere. I prefer to cut instead of boost, unless it's for an actual reason. But when you're boosting highs, you need to be careful, because highs in particular can really just hurt your ears. And when you boost anything up there, you're running the risk of just boosting those bad frequencies. So usually what I do is just take out the bad frequencies and then just boost the whole thing up, instead of just overcompensating and boosting highs in general. Where or how do you make the atmospheric parts of your tune, such as the intro, synth sounds? So yeah, I'll go through that in a minute as well. I'll go into the sound design pretty light at the end, as that's the most in-depth bit. But throughout the intro is this pad sound, if I can find it. This here, which is, I'm pretty sure, from Splice or something. Yes, it's this from Splice. Let's see if I've still got it. SHH. synth loop. Maybe it's this. Okay, here we go. So this was the original version of the sample that I used, which is still pretty atmospheric as it is, but all I've done is pitch it down, and I've added a few things. But most of the sounds coming from this volcano, which I'm pretty sure doesn't work as a plugin because I haven't used it for so long. But that was using a preset called electricity on the distortion section, and that's what's making it sound distorted. What are you tweaking Saturn on hats? Did I have Saturn on the hats? I do. Sorry, I forgot to go through that. Saturn is literally just slightly distorting it. Again, just with a clean tube, and I'm boosting the highs slightly. I find that Saturn's really good for boosting sections, even though this little EQ here is like probably a small part of the whole plugin. It's not a EQ plugin, but the top end is really nice because it's quite minimal. If you're careful with it, and it just cuts out another step, so I didn't have to then EQ it again. But that was just adding more brightness to the hats, and just distorting it slightly. But it's pretty much the default setting there. I'll go back onto this thing here. But yeah, this is the whole of the intro, which is just playing, just automating the volume slightly. But that's what's providing the atmosphere underneath, pretty much entirely, throughout the intro. And all I've done that, yeah, so volcano on the electricity setting, just taking out the lows and the highs, so I didn't feel like I needed the crispness from it. So I've just taken it out, and it just makes it more atmospheric, and it pushes it back further in the mix. I've used a side widener just to create some interest in the stereo section, and I've taken out a harsh frequency here, which I just felt like wasn't great to have. But again, you can see like I'm not boosting anywhere. I'm just taking away, then doing stuff afterwards. I've used this as well, which is a vinyl emulator plugin, which is just adding some noise on the top when it comes in maybe later. Just really, really slight noise. And then it's also adding some like a wobble to the pitch. So I'll emphasize it for you a little bit. But that's just, it makes it sound more haunted. Yeah. And then slight, just this thing here, which just automates the volume slightly. But it all adds to that sort of uneasy feeling. I do that quite a lot. Just add, it's called RC20 Retro Color. And it's a really, really good plugin. What he said, do you utilise soft clipping limiting in your mix other than on the master? If so, how? I noticed a lot of producers using soft clips and drums. So yeah, pretty much when you're using a sausage fanner, it's not exactly soft clipping, but you're brick wall limiting the sound, which is essentially the same thing. You're stopping it from clipping, and you're just completely squashing the sound. But that's how you get louder drums anyway. You just compress it, and yeah, soft clipping is a good way to do that as well. But the more you distort, the more you saturate a sound, usually the louder it gets. So yeah, just use saturation in your mixes. That's what I say anyway. That's what I do. So,
make your music stand out, get more views, and way more engagement. Bring your music to life. Get Music Visualizer. In every format, even for social media. Get started today. The link is in the description.
So, that's as I said, like, it's such a simple tune. That's the whole of the intro. And then it comes into this breakdown section. You still got that playing in the background, just the violin in the back. And that's pretty much it. I've got this from Splice, which is just a sample, and I've pitched it slightly. It's just providing the hit, just to make it sound a bit more interesting, and fill it up slightly. And then I start to introduce this this synth that runs throughout the whole tune. And it's just in the background at the moment with a reverb. And that's pretty much all that section is. And then I've got this here. So this is what I do in most of my tunes. At the moment it's rendered out, but I've got a sample from Splice or something, and I've layered them all up and I've just pitched them and then rendered it out. And it's really simple, but it adds just more in the background. It's just basically like a riser. Sorry about the distortion. My computer's melting. And then along with that, I've got a couple of risers here, which I've just made in Serum. And really simple. But I've just taken the main synth sound and just stretch it so you can play one note of it, and just literally automated a couple of things. And then you get a rise that's pretty much in the same tone as your synth, and then it's not just a sample, so it's actually like your own, and it just adds to your own sound, I guess. But that's just pretty much like white noise. Yeah, so that's that, and then you've got, the main part of this tune, which is the sound design. I literally stumbled across this sound, and completely by luck, it just worked in this tune. But it's a really odd synth, and I've tried using it in some sort of way in other tunes, and it's so unique and just like fiddly to use. It can't be used anywhere else. So this sit by itself. Just a really weird sound. But pretty much all the sound is from a sine wave being FM'd completely against a saw. And then the whole sound is from this resonance here. So without the resonance, it just sounds a bit like, bit weird. And then with the resonance, it just emphasizes completely that hit. And Serum, your main source. Yeah, I use Serum for everything, except sometimes I use sub-boom bass as well, which is just really good for subs, obviously, and just odd sounds. But 99% of the time, I'll open Serum and I'll work from that. But yeah, this is just trial and error, and that's all I can really say for my sound design. Is every time it just seems to be like a fluke, and until you stumble across a sound, I'll keep going with it, and eventually I'll find something that works. But yeah, all I've done is a sine FM'd against a saw, which is 4 octaves down. And then I've done some post-processing here. So this is what I do in pretty much every sound. A little bit of hyperdimension, a fair bit of distortion, which is just pushing the sound a little bit more, adding a bit more to the highs. A little bit of chorus, so just adding some more width. A little bit of compression, and I'm just boosting the highs a lot, because I found the sound was just really dull without it. So this is without, and with. Just completely makes it stand out. And yeah, just a really simple sound. I've got this here, I don't know how much it's doing. I'm not even doing anything. Okay, so it's literally just that. And then post-processing wise, I'm in the peak of my sausage fattener days, so I pretty much have it on everything. So I've got a lot of fatness, which is just trashing the sound to start with. That's how it sounds originally. And then with the sausage, it just adds to that attack of the sound, so it turns more into a hit than like a womp sort of sound. So yeah, sausage fattener, then I'm EQing slightly. Just taking out frequencies that I just didn't want. A lot in the low mids here. And that's just because of the resonance that I've done in the filter. As I said, it's such a fiddly sound to use. But this here, you're just completely boosting it. So you then just take it away, but you still got the sound behind it. I've then got trash on it, which is literally just probably on, a little gentle push, so it's not doing a lot at all, and the mix is really low. Just more distortion. OTT, which is just pushing it more, compressing everything, and then boosting the highs a little bit as well. Plays. And that really brings out the sound. And then another EQ, which is just taking out another harsh frequency. So you can see, like, at the start, I'll do more broad sort of EQ. Do you do most of your processing within Serum? So I'd use both. So Serum, you can see I've got a fair bit on, which is doing a fair bit. But then I also want to refine the sound. So by the time it goes into here, it's pretty much the same sound. And all I want to do is just clean it up a little bit. But yeah, at the start, I'm just doing like broad strokes with my EQ and taking up major frequencies. And then I'll distort and compress it. And then at the very end, I'll just take up smaller things I don't feel just sit quite right. And then all of this down here is just automation. But yeah, that's all I'm doing to it. Just distort and saturate, and then EQ slightly. And that's just going throughout pretty much the whole track with this pitch envelope, just making it down pitch like that. And then over here, towards the end of the drop, just to change it slightly, I have just automated the attack slightly. So, just slightly different. But that's all it is. That's pretty much the whole tune. And then, just in the background, I've got this here, which just literally just makes it a bit more exciting. Which is probably the same sound, yeah, very similar sound, but I've increased this from like -1 or something to 3 octaves up. And that just, so it's still in the same tone of it, but it's just a different sound. And this is processed differently. I come up with your riffs, or are you just playing around with MIDI in the clips with mouse or using the keyboard? You do swing your track. Okay, so I'll answer these both now. When I go about making tunes, this was a complete fluke. When I say this was a fluke, I didn't even have an idea of what I wanted to do. But I found out that down pitch in the synth just sounded cool. And you can just see how simple it is. I've just gone in and just painted those notes in. I don't use a keyboard or anything. Just painted those notes in and just sounded like this. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe if I down pitch that would sound even better. And it just made it sound so much darker. And then I just worked from that, really. Yeah, this is such a simple tune. I was hoping you'd be able to see that. I'm not particularly proud of like how I've done stuff now, but you can see, like, even if you're just starting and you didn't have like anywhere near as much knowledge as I do now, just from producing more, you can still make a track that does fairly well and people seem to like. So, but at the time, this seemed really complicated, which is what you'll find. Like, it doesn't matter like how much you know, as long as you can do it and you can use it effectively. That's all that really matters. It doesn't have to be a right or wrong way about it. So, yeah, one layer and then the second layer in the background. And this is just processed slightly differently. So this one is taking up more of the mids. So I've got this main sound that's covering the mids and the highs, and I just wanted this one just to add to the high end. I didn't want to just clutter up the mids even more. So I've taken it out, and then I've used a micro shift to spread the sound out wide. So you've got this one that's completely mono, and then this one's wide, just adding to that stereo feel. And it just makes it more exciting. And then I've got another OTT on it, just boosting those highs again. Yeah. We're going to be able to watch this again after my Wi-Fi's being... So is mine. Yeah, I think it's... Alex will have to say, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's archived afterwards. I forgot to mention about the swing, by the way. How I swing my drums is completely manually. So the only thing that's swung in this track, I think, is the hi-hat, and the rest of it actually isn't swung. But some people say that's not right to do, but I don't mind swinging some aspects and not swinging others. I just find that I always pretty much swing my hats and my snares, and I'll keep some stuff straight. So the synth is just straight, no swing. But I don't do that like in MIDI or anything. You can see I do all my drums in audio. Yeah, so go back onto the sound design and stuff. One synth, two synths, and then it's backed up by this main stab, which again I'm pretty sure was just a complete fluke, messing around maybe like with an old synth and then getting something else out of it. So this one is, let's try and like remember what I did now. This one again is just a saw. So you can see I pretty much always use basic shapes in my sound design. It's completely detuned, like there's no tune to this at all. It's 70 cents down, and this one's 100 cents down, so it's just not playing that note at all. And it's just a saw with a sine wave using bend plus. This is really good, by the way, if you want to use bend plus or bend plus minus. It's usually just makes the sound like distort a little bit more. So yeah, just playing around with that just changes the sound slightly. And they're both just on full volume. And then most of the sound is coming from this comb filter. So this is without, which is just like a sort of fart sort of noise. It's nothing like special. There's no highs to it. So I've added a comb plus filter with really high resonance, which just pretty much gives the whole sound. I'll take off the automation stuff 1 minute. Here we go. Yeah, so that just completely changes the sound from that to that. And that's all from the resonance here. And that was probably just completely trial and error again until I just got a sound that I liked. And I've pretty much done the same processing as I did in the other one, with the exception being this distortion here, which I've automated. So without that, it's just you don't get the highs, and then I've automated it so as the sound progresses, the highs get distorted more and then less. Yeah, so it just adds more interest to that sound and more movement. Don't use reverberation on sounds. Not on my drums. I don't add any reverb to, because I just like that dry sort of sound that comes with it. I'll put reverb on synths, as you can see here. So I've got one here, which is just adding a slight amount of reverb, and then this one is automated. But yeah, I like the contrast between really dry drums and then a slightly reverbed bass. Do you open up FL with an idea in mind, or do you go and blindly mess around so you come up with something? Both. So I'll start off. Do you think simplistic works so well? Okay, so I won't always go in with the anticipation just to make a tune, but I'll always go in and lay down some drums, and then I'll use that to sound design. I don't like just sound designing like blankly and without anything to go off, because sounds are, you can't just pick up, like when you use a preset pack, for example, the sounds, unless you use them really creatively, you can see like how many sounds I've got here. A sound works in a tune for that tune. So this, as I said, I'd never use this sound in another tune. But as you can see, like I've got almost 300 presets here just from going in. I'll save different variations of things. And honestly, I probably won't go back. This is going back 2 or 3 years now, these ones. And I probably won't even go back to those. But I will work off the same sort of 20 or 30 synths and just trial and error them out, and trial them out until I get something that I could probably work with, and I'll just change the synth more to suit that tune. Why do you think simplistic works so well? I think in this tune anyway, it works so well because the synth is so minimal, and there's not a lot going on otherwise. And I think that just makes the drop just a lot harder than it would be if it was a complex tune. And it literally just does one purpose in this case. It's just a tune, a really simple build-up and a really simple drop. And that's all it really is, which I think as you've got a clear focus with a tune, that is just really useful. So yeah, this synth here, like the main stab, is then countered by this here, which is a respace. I called it a respace, it's not really, but it's just a weird sound. This is probably made, yes, this is made through the same, so I made this stab first, and I've just duplicated it, and then I would have thought, oh, okay, I need a variation here just to make it a bit more interesting. And I've just messed around with the detune on these and the comb filter, and I've made a new sound, which is just a really strange sort of fill sound. But it's essentially the same thing. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing, and it's just distorting slightly, and that's how you get this weird pitch up sort of sound. But again, it's just the comb plus filter that's giving all of that sound. Do you plan to make your own sample pack? I did make one about 2 months into producing, which I still cringe at now, and it's dreadful. So probably maybe at some point, but at the moment probably not. But I'm planning to do more tutorials, maybe more breakdowns. That'd be really good. Just going through my old tunes. Could you show one of your old bass patches? I can't get that good bass sound in Serum a lot of the time. Yeah, I can show you like an old synth. You can sort of see like the progression, I guess. So, pretty inspired by Lorenzo at the start of Notion, as you can see. But this was probably like the first sounds I ever made with Serum, and this was 2018. Just trying to think of one that might be seriously sick. I wonder what this is. It's probably shit. Yeah, it's just dreadful. So, as you can see, I'm just sort of messing around with it again. But you can see like the progression, I guess. But it's still sort of along the same lines, just literally just messing around with the sound. And using the detunes here to come up with something. But yeah, let's turn that off because that was dreadful. Someone pack the other day. Oh, was you? Yeah, it was. I don't want to give out that sample pack anymore. Are you consciously producing with call and response in mind, or are you kind of just vibing because call and response is everywhere in this? Yeah, that's true. Actually, I haven't really thought about that, but it is. I think all of my tunes are just call and response, and because this is such a minimal tune, I think call and response works because I usually start with a stab just to get that main impact. And then something else, and then you're going back into that stab, which just leads you nicely back through the track. But at the same time, I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just sort of thinking what sounds good, and what sounds interesting, and you just sort of get into a pattern of it. Going more through the sound design, there's another stab here, which is just another variation of that main one. Yeah, again, just slightly different. There we go. Yeah. Just adding more variation. So yeah, halfway through the drop, because I didn't want it to get too repetitive, you can see it goes from like one stab every 4 bars to this section here, which is like more quick. And it's a stab every single bar. It just makes it so much more relentless. Yeah, so every single first hit of that new bar, you just get like bodied by this synth again. It just adds more variation pretty much. Yeah, so that's pretty much the sound design of this. And then we just go, same thing. Just slight variation on the pitching, just to make it more interesting again. And then the sub on this tune, I was having a nightmare with, I remember. And I went through several versions with different subs. But I presume it's made, yeah, it's made the same way that I make them now. Just in Serum, just a sine wave put through a low pass troll filter. And what I'll do is I'll whack the drive all the way up. And when you do that, you turn the sine wave more into a square. It just adds way more harmonics to it. And then I'm just using the cutoff here just to control how much of the highs get let through. And processing wise, I haven't gone processing on the synth either, so I'll go through that now. Processing on that is just a Pro Q. Again, just EQing out and boosting this low mid section, which I was really struggling with because it didn't feel full enough, but then that sorted it out. Just pushing that slightly. Did you teach yourself how to use Serum for sound design? Yeah, pretty much completely. I used to use Massive, so if you've been following me like for ages, tunes like Squeaky Floor made in Massive, and that was just a preset, just modified. And then I decided, because I couldn't make sounds from scratch in there easily, I just decided to use Serum. And since then, I make everything from scratch, and it's still the same process of trial and error, but you know roughly what would work. Yeah. So processing wise on the sounds here, I'll go through them. Pretty sure they're all processed in the same channel. Stutters. Yeah, everything's going through the same thing. So I was really lazy this tune. Well, have I gone through this? I've already gone through this, haven't I? Yeah, ignore me. I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, that's the sound design. That's the sub. It's just one note. So hitting that first note, that first stab, and then just one long note on the down pitch. Slightly sidechain there as well. So yeah, that's the majority of the tune. The vocal, which is up here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So the vocal was something that came along pretty early into it, just by chance again. It was just one of those tunes. You saw I made it in 11 hours or so. I probably made this tune in a couple of days. And it was just from Splice. Let's see if we can... So this is how it starts off originally.
We have the supreme weapons.
Which is just from Splice. It's from like one of those movie sample packs. And I've stretched it a lot.
Supreme weapons.
Yeah, and when you do that, you just down pitch it loads, and it just made it sound so much darker. So I kept it at that, and so yeah. So going throughout the whole thing, you've got the vocal,
The supreme weapons.
which is what really like made me enjoy making this tune. I think that's like the turning point. When I found this vocal and it just sort of worked, that's when I decided to finish this tune. Because until then, it was just a lot of trial and error with sound design, and this sort of made it. And it just works really well before the drop.
Supreme weapons.
Yeah. But I try and use samples in creative ways where I can. And here I have stretched the vocal even more, which just made this really, really strange sound. But that's just the vocal again. Probably processed differently, I'm guessing. So it's got a massive delay on it. And don't know how much of it still works. Yeah. And then you've got another layer here, which is just the vocal. Yeah, so this is just a different vocal from Splice. It's just someone laughing, I think. Yeah, I've just chopped that up. How do you go about translating your tunes to other devices? For example, checking how it sounds on earphones, car speakers. I don't really. If it sounds good on my monitors, I presume that it sounds decent and everything else. Maybe I'll try it in my car. Just to see how the sub feels, because that's got stronger subwoofers. But apart from that, you just have to be careful about keeping your mix fairly flat. And don't do anything like silly. But as long as it sounds decent in your monitors, that's going to be your best way to tell if everything sounds good, because that's your most accurate way of telling the sound, how it sounds. But yeah, I just want it to sound good on monitors primarily, because if it sounds good on monitors, it will sound good in the club. And most likely, it will sound good on phones and everything. But as long as you have like a distorted sub, like I do here, where it's like a square or something, and it's got some sort of harmonics, you'll be able to definitely like feel that on your phone, or not feel it, sorry, but hear it. Yeah. And then here I've got the vocal again, but stretched an absolute ton. Which is pretty much the entire build-up. Just going underneath and just providing a bit more, just more darkness to the build. How long do you spend on a track before you call it complete? A track's never really complete. You can always just go back into it and you can mess around with something for days. But I think there's a time, I find when I get bored of making the tune, where I'm just like, it sounds good. And I start doing more stuff to it and I realise I'm just making it sound worse. I'll just stop there and I'll think, okay. Then I'll just like send it around to people and I'll say, how does this sound? And finally I'll get feedback from like people that I talk to a lot, producer-wise. And if they say it all sounds good, I'm going to trust their ears more than my own, because eventually you just get sick of your own tunes. When you're making it in such a short window like I made this one, I find that, trusting someone else, and when they say it's fine, it's probably fine, and you're probably just overthinking it if you don't think it's okay. Sounds like the track didn't have much of an identity before you put in that vocal and started having fun with it. Can you speak to how important having vocals in a track is, at least sparingly, especially in this genre of music? Yeah, so without this vocal, it's a pretty like soulless track. It's not a lot to it. It's just drums and that synth. But then you can see how much of the effects are coming from that one vocal. So you've got loads of sounds, really, just from these. Which is just completely the vibe to it. And when I found like these sounds and I was making these dark sounds, I knew where this track was going to go from then on. And I think finding a vocal early on in your tune is so important just to work around. And you can just so easily picture it in a club or something when it's got a vocal. And just without it, it's just nothing. Like, yeah. So you need the vocal in there, definitely. And that just helps you focus where to take the track forward. What's the biggest reason for you for using the FabFilter EQ instead of the FL EQ? FabFilter EQ is incredible. I use the Pro Q3 now, which is even better. But yeah, Pro Q2, you can just so easily take out specific frequencies. So when you use the FL one, which I haven't opened in about a million years, there's only so much. You only have 7 channels, for example. And the narrowest cut you can do is still pretty wide. But if you want to take out really, really narrow EQs, the Pro Q2 is just so much better. But yeah, that's pretty much why I use the Pro Q instead of the FL EQ. Trying to think what else I've got going on. Not a lot, I've just got some really minor effects. And, this is really good. Yeah, I was like pretty pleased when I made this. So this is the main sort of hit you hear before the drop, which is just a kick stretched, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, stretched a lot. And then I've used Pro Q Sausage Fattener again, and then I've used a Volcano 2 on the electricity setting again. So the same one that I put on the violin, I've put on this one, which is just under the distortion section in that. And then I've just widened it. But that I do quite a lot now. I'll get some sort of like percussion sound and I'll stretch it a ton. And when you do that, you just make these weird just sound to it that you don't really normally hear. But yeah, that just sounds so much darker than a normal percussion hit. Yeah, so I think that is pretty much the entire tune. There's a few other things like background noises, like that, which just sort of blends into the background a little bit more than other elements. It just supports the whole tune. But yeah, hopefully you found that useful. That's Supreme. If you've got any questions about it, let me know, and I'll try and answer those quickly. But if not, I'll just go through the next tune, which you'll see I made about maybe 3 months ago, and it's a lot different to how this is. But then at the same time, it shares a lot of the same characteristics. What post-processing element would you consider to be the most important for your basses? Distortion, definitely. Using OTT, as you can see, I still use that now. I just find that really boosts sections that you, like the highs, for example. It does it really well. But yeah, post-processing on a synth, I just find I try and boost everything as much as I can. Yeah, that's pretty much all I'm trying to do with the bass sound. Just make it as like aggressive as possible. And then you're like right to the front of the mix, and by distorting and saturating, that's really how you do it. Are any of the drum elements set into key? No, as I said, like my theory is not great. I try and keep some stuff to a certain note. So I tried in that tune, most of the notes was E note, so I was trying to make all my drums around that. But again, if it doesn't really matter. As long as it sounds good, that's all that is important. For those background elements, did you find them for the tune, or did you already have them? I made it as I went along. So when I start, I have the drums, and then I have the sound design that I do. And then I was probably just looking for the vocal, and I was messing around with that, just trying to fill it up in any way I could. So yeah, it's just sort of as you go. What's in your master, and do you mastering your tracks or send to engineers? On my master, you've seen this one as well. I forgot to go through that. It's just a sausage fattener. But yeah, I'm not the only one to do that. I know it's quite bad, but it makes the track loud. You just need to be careful a little bit with the low mids. When you use a sausage fattener, it really pushes the lows. So you need to be careful with that. How do you go about looking for vocals? Do you have an idea of what you're looking for? At the time, I didn't. I was sort of just blindly looking through Splice, and that just worked. Whereas nowadays, I'll try and find a vocal early on, and I'll go through that. Oh my god, what is it? Okay, here we go. Do you use any plugins in your master? Yeah, just sausage fattener. But yeah, as you can see, like I try and keep things as simple as possible, processing wise, and if I can cut a corner in some sort of way, I will, because mostly that's just through my computer not being able to handle everything. So I've just found ways to combine stuff. But yeah, this is the second tune I'm going to do. Fattener's real nice in the master. It is, and you can immediately tell when someone's using a sausage fattener. I think Taiki Newlight was doing it as well. Distinct, obviously. Chris Lorenzo, I'm pretty sure, does it. It just really nicely glues your track, which I'll have it on from the very start. So I'll open the project and I'll put a sausage fattener on the master straight away, because then you know what is going to limit your master first. So usually it's like you can hear what's clipping, and you can just turn that down, and then eventually your tunes just sound louder because you can balance it with the limiter already on. So why do you put your drums in audio instead of MIDI? Is it just preference? Sorry, default settings on master sausage. I just leave it as it is. No gain, no fatness. But then I'll push all of my channels as hard as I can into that. And that's how you keep it loud. But yeah, I'll just keep that with nothing else on it. Seems like sausage fattener ad. Yeah, I'm still waiting for the sponsorship. I live by sausage fattener. Why do you put your drums in audio instead of MIDI? That is just through personal preference. I find when you do it through MIDI, it's harder to variate your drums. Whereas if you lay it out like this, I can see exactly where to take out drums, for example, like here. And I just find that so much easier. And then when I'm adding swing as well, I do that manually. And it's so much easier to do it in MIDI so much easier to do it in audio than in MIDI. And that's just a habit that I've got into. I do it in everything pretty much in audio except for my synths. How did you get that track signed to Nubass? And on that note, how did you go about getting 2-piece signed to the label? Feel free to expand. I've actually learned so much already. Oh, I'll stick to here. That's good. Yeah, hopefully it's all like useful. I'm teaching myself how I used to produce as well, which has been quite interesting. With Nubass, since the very first time I started producing, it was my aim to get into Nubass, I think. And I think a lot of people have that. And I just got talking to AC Slater a few times, just through submitting stuff to his email and through the Nubass promo. And eventually I submitted Supreme, I know, actually, first of all, I had that tune with Deps called Degenerate. And that was just through the promo email on Nightbase. And just by luck, they were looking for a freshman EP at the time. So they were signing new people onto the label. And that's pretty much how I got in with them. And since then, I built up a relationship with AC Slater and the other guys that work there. And yeah, that's sort of been the way. But it was mostly down to luck. And the fact that AC noticed me beforehand, I think, helped. And since then, once you're in with them and you're in with like labels, it's so much easier to work with them. And they'd rather take your stuff because they've already signed you before than then sign on more artists. So yeah, nowadays it's pretty easy, and I'm hoping to get some more stuff onto there soon. I'm just trying to finish it all off. But yeah, Nightbase are a great label and they've helped so much. So much. Synth-based artists rely on that fatter and it's hilarious, but yeah. Where do you go for most of your drums? Most of my drums, as I said, are just from Vengeance. They're so usable. All the claps are just very standard. And if you just process them slightly, they just sound really good. And then for like odd hits, I'll go into Splice maybe. And mess with those. My aim is archives now. Oh, cheers. By the way, I love what you're doing with the label. That's what direction I hope bass goes in. Yeah, me too. That's basically why we've made it. It's not the same as Nightbase, but it shares a lot of the similarities with that darker side, which I think's been lost in the UK a lot recently. But yeah, it's still going strong in America, but I wanted to sort of try and push that sound more over here. Yeah. But thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the stuff about the archives. It means a lot. If your synth bass is lacking frequency somewhere, do you try and boost creative with saturation distortion? So yeah, if I'm missing some frequencies, like especially in the mid-range, distorting helps that so much. So Trash 2, for example, is really good for adding mids to synths. And that's where I normally go about doing it. I just distort it a bit more. You and Depth's doing great stuff. Much love from you. Oh, cheers. Big up. Yeah. Right. I'd love to keep on answering your questions, but I'm going to start on this tune here, which is called Wild West. Don't know if many of you would have heard it, but it's been going around a little bit in my mixes, and it's also like the best example of a tune that I'd make now. That's like a heavy one with interesting elements. So this is a remix, pretty much, of the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme tune, which you'll know, I'm sure. Yeah. So I'll play it through now from the build-up onwards.
You're the son of 1,000 fathers, all bastards like you.
You smell like a pig already.
So yeah, this is much more my sound now, and I was really proud with how this came out actually. And yeah, this needs to drop. I hope so. I've been trying to clear the sample, and I'm talking to Sony at the moment about hopefully getting this out. But at the moment, it's not looking likely. The composer sadly died the week after I submitted this, so it's been a bit difficult with the Italian team that have been working on this. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully sometime, maybe if not as a free download. But yeah, so this tune, you can see way more of how I go about things. So this is the drums. Just play this by themselves. So yeah, this is much more like complicated, you'll see, hopefully, but then at the same time it's very similar. So you got a kick here, which is just some super distorted kick, probably from Pack here maybe. I think this one here. Yeah. these are the decap kicks. Probably this one maybe, something like that. So yeah, they're all sorts of similar sort of sound. Just really distorted, full boxy kicks. What's your EQ master trainer on? Guess the drums so loud.
Make your music stand out, get more views, and way more engagement. Bring your music to life. Get Music Visualizer. In every format, even for social media. Get started today. The link is in the description.
Cracking bit of squid, that one. I'll go through that in a bit. But yeah, so it starts with a kick. Simplon's just automating the EQ, but this is a lot of EQ on this. So this started out as a really, really boxy kick, and without the EQs on, it's just too much in the low mids. So I've taken out a lot here, and I've boosted here, which is just the transient. There's like a slight click on it, and I wanted to just boost that slightly. I've used the glue, so this is what I do now. I will use this plugin here called the glue, which is just basic compression plugin, and it's based off the one in Ableton called, I think it's just called the glue. And here I am clipping. So when you do this, it brick wall limits it again. So it's basically like a sausage fattener, but you can slightly more control it. So it's compressing it slightly, brick wall limiting it, and then I'm pushing it more just to make it even louder. And then I'm doing a bit more EQ, taking out the low mids again. This 150 range is really something that I work on a lot. It's just totally mud, and you don't really want it in many elements. Same with 300 Hertz as well. I find 300 Hertz is just mud, and you don't really want it. So I cut there quite a lot, and I'll just cut away the high frequencies that I don't need, just leaving more space in the higher end. So that's the kick, and then the clap is 4 layers. I think it's all from, for once it's not Vengeance, it's from, might be from this? No, it's from some analog pack or something, maybe from Splice. But it's just 4 different claps, all with a different sound. And this long tail one here. So you've got 3 really snappy kicks and 1 just providing the body to it. And they're all going, 3 of them, so the short snappy ones are going to 1 channel. Which is taking slight frequencies out here, boosting some and taking out the mids. G clip, so I wanted this tune just to be completely crushed basically and like high energy. So I've clipped the claps a lot, which is making them so much louder. Decapitator, which is just more distortion. An imager, so I'm probably pushing out the claps wider. Yeah, so I'm taking in the lower bits more mono, and I'm pushing out the top just so it fills more of the stereo range. And then some more EQ. So I'm boosting more than I was on Supreme. So I'm boosting now, and then just being careful really where I boost, and like I'm still cutting areas that I feel are just not needed. And then I've got a transient shaper called Bittersweet on. I'm still trying to find a really good transient shaper. This probably isn't my favourite now, still. But it does the same job. It just really makes the clap snap when it hits. And then you've got this, which is just, okay, so this is taking out the mids in the mono section. Sorry, it's taking out the, 1 minute, what's it doing? Yeah, it's taking out the mids in the mono, and it's just boosting the sides in the high end, just making it more clear. Would you ever consider switching out the copyright samples and still getting it signed? Possibly. The problem is when you make a tune, you see how it's supposed to be. So I just felt this is how this tune was meant to be, with that sampling. It's really hard to then go back on that, but possibly if I can't get it released, I might look at doing that. So yeah, that's the claps. It's got the kick and the claps together. Fuck. So you can see the kick again is just at 0 dB. Yeah, and then I'm processing this lower one slightly differently. But again, fairly similar. So I'm taking out the highs because the other claps are covering that section. Decapitator again, just crushing it. Yeah, kilohertz transient shape is like good. That's probably what I'd use now. Bittersweet's decent, but it really makes the click like too loud, and then you need to really process it to get it back down. So yeah, just more processing, more EQ, and then I've probably made this one completely mono, just to add to the power in the middle. And I've done the same thing, taking out the mids taking out the mono mids. Then got the hi-hats. I don't know what pack I was using for this. I must have just downloaded one and really liked everything in it. But it's another analog sort of sound. Just a nice tight hi-hat and then just a really short hi-hat. Just adding to the attack of the sound. And then I've got a shaker here from Splice. Just layering up that sound. So again, it's really boring, but more EQ, taking out a frequency that I didn't like. Yeah, look, you can see it's peaking there. And I just thought that was way too high. So I took it back down, so it wasn't doing that. Nowadays I'd use this. PSP plugins are sick. This mix saturator, I was just saturating the hi-hats a lot. And when you saturate something, you do compress it slightly as well. So I was taking out the dynamic range in that, and then it just adds more light to the hi-hat. So without, and then with, just adds even more to it. More EQ, just taking out really fine areas now. So it starts off, as I said earlier, like really broad, and then you do stuff to it, and then you go back into the EQ and take out the frequencies that you don't want again. Transient shaper, so yeah, this one's decent now. I don't know why I use two different ones in this tune. And then the same thing, just taking out the mids on the side, which you don't want. Do you layer hi-hats often? Yeah, I layer hi-hats in every tune. Just like when you just have one hi-hat by itself, one hi-hat won't cover everything that you want it to do. So then if you've got some that have a really sharp attack and then some which are longer, you can compensate and you can balance out what parts of which hat you like. How do you search on Splice to find samples that work in bass tracks? So when I'm looking through Splice, I'll literally search random packs. Usually in the chart, I'll go through like any new ones that come up, and then I'll go through the sounds. And pretty much all my libraries, it's mostly just percussion stuff, and the odd effects, maybe like really basic, like white noise or something. But yeah, but I use it pretty sparingly. I'll just use it to fill up areas, but I don't really rely on it. So yeah, that's the hi-hat, that's the clap. Just all sort of similar processing. So you've got a swung hat here as well, just manually added in, so I've slightly pushed it. Just adding some slight variation. And then here, I've got a snare which I just felt worked so well in this tune. So this is just from Vengeance, of course. And it's just a really shitty sounding snare. And I've probably crushed it, yeah. So, taking out lots of the mids. And boosted around like where the main thud of the snare is. Some vintage tape by Ozone, that's really good. Just to add more crunch to the sound. So I'm driving this one an absolute ton. So without it, it sounds like this. And then with, just really crushes it even more. Yeah. And then I've got that RC20 again. This time just distorting slightly. Probably doesn't do a lot at all, but it's just more distortion and everything. But yeah, it's just two snares layered up. Both going to the same channel as well. More basic EQ on that. PSP again, this is what I use now pretty much exclusively on my drums. Especially on claps, I'm surprised I haven't used it on this one. This is just like another distortion plugin. And it's driven a lot, so without just made it so much more lively. So yeah, use one of those. Some weird EQ here, just boosting areas that I felt was needed. So with the snare and the actual drop, I've taken out a lot of the lows because you've got the sub and you don't want it to clash. But then in the build-up, there's no lows from the sub or anything. So then you can afford to like push those lows more and make a more powerful snare. So I've got that, and then as it goes towards the drop, I've got another one coming in. Just a different, like, weird percussion thing. So, okay, I'll go through this because this is quite interesting. So this originally started as just a weird percussion thing, pitched down. And then I've used Serum Effects. This is what I do now on a lot of my percussion things. I use ring mod on this, which just makes it like rattle. That's the only way I can really describe it. So without it, it's... And then with just even more distortion driven. But yeah, that's really a really good thing to just make stuff sound weird. Use ring mod on drums. So yeah, on my effects, I usually go really heavy with the distortion, just really crushing it, and then yeah, taking out some lows again. About to go through this synth here. So this is how it is by itself. Again, it's just two detuned sort of saws basically, with a bend plus minus on. Just going through a oh, is that the different? That's a different one. Sorry, two saws basically, just two detuned saws. One with ring modulation on. So without ring modulation, it's like this. And then with, which is just much more gritty. And then I've got a little bit of hyperdimension, and then some really small amount of distortion that is just automated a slight amount, barely at all. And then some compression as well. Yeah, so that's pretty simple synth. That was just trial and error with the detune and the ring modulation to make it sound like that. But pretty much most of my sounds are based on basic shapes, like any of these really. Just slightly different, yeah, stuff going on. And then it's backed up by this synth here. Which is, again, I've probably just taken a bass that I made at some point and I just used it in this and slightly altered it. Which is just, this time it's just a saw wave with a sine, again with bend plus minus on, just to give it that weird sound. Yeah, doing a lot there. And then going through a low pass filter with a lot of drive. And then with this one I'm using this sub oscillator, not as a sub, but it's just providing more distortion. So without, it just tames it back a little bit and makes it sound just a bit more gritty. That's good. 23 of you now, that's better. Yeah, hopefully this is all good. It still looks good in mine, so should be fine. And then I'll go through the processing in a minute. And then there's one more synth here, which is probably the same. Yeah, just using different wavetables. Again, I've just slightly changed this one. And the filter's slightly different, with more chorus and way more hyperdimension. So, as I was saying, like with Supreme as well, I like to have my main synths all mono, and then I'll use my fill basses to like fill up the wide area. So this one's just, so it's really wide and then it's back into the mono, which just that really nice contrast, which I do in a lot of my tunes now. It's just, again, that call and response sort of thing that Supreme had. You've got the mono calling and then you've got the response here and then back into that. So yeah, just adds a bit more variation. And then halfway through the tune, so especially in the second drop, there's another layer that comes in just to slightly change the synth, because I couldn't get anything else out of it at the time, so I was thinking, how could I vary this a little bit more? And the easiest way was to just add another layer, which took some trial and error, but got there in the end. So it sounds like this.
Smell like a pig already.
So it's just a really nice sort of harmonic on it, which makes it sound even bigger. So this is it here. And it's a really simple synth, so I probably just copied and pasted the synth and then messed around with it. So it's literally just a detuned saw wave, just over the top. But then layered, it actually sounds completely different. So yeah, it's just another aspect to vary the synth slightly. And that's just, yeah, detuned saw, same sort of filters, just a low pass filter. And then same sort of processing here. So yeah, that'll be processed differently to the main synth. Well no, it's not actually, it's all in one. So this is how I processed them. So I've learned how to sidechain by this point, and so I'm putting it through a shaper box, which is just like an LFO tool sort of thing. So that's sidechaining everything. And then there was a reason, actually, I'll go into it in a minute, but yeah, just some slight EQ, taking out the highs, taking out the lows, especially in the low mids. Like the 150 hertz area, as I said earlier, is just like pure mud. You don't want that. And a 300 hertz area. So I'll just cut those a little bit. And then boosted areas that I felt like added more power to the sound. Yeah, all looking good still. Good. Decapitator, which is just crushing the sound fully. Yeah, a lot of drive on that. Camel Crusher, which I use pretty much exclusively on basses now. I just find it's got a really harsh distortion, which, like, when you use in the right way, can be pretty good. So without it, it's probably a completely different sound. So this is without. And then with just a ton more distortion, and just really boost those mids and just makes it sound a lot thicker. So after you do distortion, I tend to, so like you can see a pattern here, so EQ, distortion, distortion, then EQ again. So I'm always going back into it and making sure it sounds exactly how I want it to. So in this case, I was taking out more frequencies I didn't want, slight boost in areas, but nothing major by that point. OTT, so I'm still doing that, and then I'm just using that to compress the sound even more. And then finally into a trash, just to bring out the sound. And this one I'm doing multiband on. So in the mids, I've got a gentle push with like 60% mix, but a lot of drive. So that's just pushing the mids a lot. So this is without. And then with. So there's tons of highs as well, coming from this mild excitement, which is just in the saturate area. Again, a low mix, because I don't really want to like completely trash the sound. I just want to just add another layer to it and just really boost some frequencies that I want. And then finally, some more intricate EQ, just adding more air to the sound, making it more crispy. And then cutting in the 500 and then 150 probably, yeah. Just taking out the low mids and making sure it doesn't clash with anything else in the mix. So that would have probably come at the very last stages of mixing, and everything else would be like as I go, just doing what I normally do. Normally topic, what do you play on Steam? I literally don't play anything. I don't know why it even shows up, but all I play is FIFA on PS4. I'm pretty boring like that. Is there a reason why you EQ before adding distortion? It's how you use it. So sometimes, for a really, really grotty sound, I will distort first, because when you leave the sub in and you distort, it gives a completely different sound to how it would when you take out the lows and distort. When you distort with lows still in, I find that it just makes it way more dirty and it just sounds crushed, which I didn't completely want by this point anyway. So I've just taken out the lows first, and then it's just playing around with it, and like knowing the order of your plugins is so important. And you've got to think logically about what do you want the sound to be like, and then as you practice more and more, you can think, okay, so I want more highs. What's a good plugin for that? Probably OTT or Trash. And that's why I've added that there. And then I've gone in and then changed it slightly still. But yeah, it's just sort of like painting. Like you're starting off large and you're doing like the main things that you want to do to it. And then you're getting narrower and narrower and adding more detail to the sound as you go on. What do you do if you're feeling blocked creatively? if I can't produce anything, I will literally just have a break. And if I have like a week off, I find that when I come back, I'm just way more inspired to produce. If I feel like really guilty about not doing any production, I'm just like, I'm in a really bad rut and I can't get anything out, I will make drum loops or I'll sound design or just mess around. Even if it's not good, it's still ideas that's just keeping you going. But it's so important not to rush anything. And if it's not working, you're not going to make something good suddenly if you're in a really bad rut. But yeah, just not forcing it is so important, because you'll find stuff you make when you're in a creative block, it might even sound okay at the time, but then when you look back on it, you will produce better stuff in a week or two. So just sort of write it out and think hopefully by the end of it you'll make something the best stuff that you've made. So I usually make the best stuff after a big time off. Do you always cut off the sub frequencies of basses and then do the sub on its own? Pretty much, except for maybe 2 tracks that I can think of, I will split the 2 up, unless I just really want a subby sort of glued sound that's together. Otherwise I will split off the sub and the main sound, just because I feel like you can get more control, and I like to push a sub much harder than the actual synth, so you can just do that differently. Whereas like if I kept the sub in this one, I would have sent that sub through all of this, which I hate to think what it would have sounded like by the end of it, because you just want a sub to be clean. But like on sounds where you're not doing much to the sound and processing, I'd probably leave the sub attached to it, but that's quite rare. But yeah, I'm sending both of these layers, so the main layer and this one, through to the same bus, like mixer channel, just because if I processed it by itself, I feel I wouldn't get it as glued together as it is when you send them to the same one. So yeah, like in the whole track I'm using 29 mix channels in the whole thing, which really isn't a lot, but I'm sending like all my basses to 1, and then that's the sub. All my basses to 1, all of my claps to 1 or 2. So yeah, I'm just trying to like optimize stuff where I can, mostly because of my computer. I've just got into that habit again. But yeah, I find it's actually quite useful now. How long does it take for you to make a track on average? So, as I said earlier, like if I get bored of it, I will probably stop making stuff on that tune. So I try and get it done as soon as possible. So this one took 15 hours. So I probably did it over a couple of days maybe, or a week, until I was happy with it. Yeah, but if a track goes on and on and on, and I leave it for a couple of weeks, I will most likely scrap it. Just because you usually lose that original like enthusiasm you have for the track, and you'll start overthinking stuff. So yeah, I try and get it done as soon as possible. As the track progresses, I've got really minimal stuff here, so I've got a little pitch envelope, which just sounds a bit more wonky when you do that. Yeah, so just little things like that, and another one here, just so it sounds like it's ramping up into the synth. And just by doing that, I've added a bit more variation to it. What else we got? Got a little fill bass here, which is just a really simple bass, just a square pretty much, detuned square, all built from the same sort of synths though, so it's just literally modifying the ones that you've had before, and then processing it differently in here, for example. So I've got more chorus in this one. It's, again, filling up that wide space. How do you come up with your melodies? Loads of trial and error, really, and sometimes it just clicks and it's just there, but sometimes I'll go through tracks where I'll make 10 different melodies and it's just finding the one that works. But I'll find myself doing similar things, so I'll always use this sort of range here, so F sharp, E maybe, but yeah, mostly around here just because the sub's the most powerful in that area. And then it just really depends on the sort of vibe you want. So in this one I wanted a really bouncy feeling to it, so just I know that keeping notes and then going up high and then down low really makes that bounce, which I just found worked, and it just came to me for this tune quickly. So yeah, they're the synths, and then underneath all of it I've got the sub, and a lot of people seem to ask me about how I do my sub, but it's really simple. Same as Supreme, just a sine wave, cut off, drive at the absolute max. Yeah, and then processing wise, literally just a Pro Q, taking out some frequencies I didn't want. But yeah, really simple, no side chaining on this one, just as it was. But yeah, peaking at like -3. Probably even push it a bit more, I would have done now. Yeah. If you're having a week off making stuff, do you do anything such as watching YouTube tutorials? I haven't done in the past. The only real tutorials I've watched recently have been the disclosure streams, which I found just so inspiring. But apart from that, I'll literally try and cut off music completely, and just not try and think about it for a bit, because you'll just end up frustrating yourself, I find. Most melodies that come up with sound cheesy after a while. Yeah, that is a risk. When you listen to a tune too much as well, they just end up sounding like nursery rhymes, and that's just not what you want. But yeah, the more you listen to it, the worse, the harder it is to make a tune, in my opinion. So just get it done as soon as possible. What's your go-to sub for more heavy bass tracks like this one in Gangsters? Yeah, I've just shown it again. But yeah, just a sine wave with loads of drive and barely any distortion. But yeah, keeping it simple, and a sub is meant to be clean, and the strongest sub is just a clean sub. So that's how I do it for this tune. But if I was doing a more techie tune, for example, I'd just distort it more so it fills up like more of this area. But I didn't need that for this tune because I've already got the synth covering here to like here, and I've got the sub just filling in that low area. But just making sure it's loud, that's like the main thing. Everyone says like, how do you get your subs to like sound so full? It's just because it's loud in the mix. Yeah, really high, and that's just how I do it. What other music inspires you besides UK bass music? Drum and bass I usually listen to. I don't actually listen to a lot of bass, really. I listen to a bit of tech, but yeah, mostly I listen to drum and bass, like the darker sort of stuff like rollers, and that's what I get most of my inspiration from now. But yeah, I don't listen to a lot of music because I'm usually bored of it by the time I've started making my own all day. I'm just all sort of music'd out, so I don't need it anymore. Is no sidechain in your sub a usual move for you? Yeah, I don't massively sidechain. I think in this one I've sidechained the main synth, but I haven't done the sub, which if you're watching a tutorial they'll say like, what's the point of that? Because yeah, the main synth doesn't clash with anything, but I found that if I sidechain the main synth, it just made it more bouncy. But then the sub just wasn't clashing with the kick, so I didn't feel like it was needed to sidechain it. Yeah. And when you sidechain, you also you lose that volume at the start, and I wanted that sub right from the kick. So I didn't want that up and down movement of the sub. I just wanted a long, straight note of it, just for more power. So sub really wants to without the master. Yeah, so sub's literally, but I'd probably even push it more now. I'd literally have it on 0. Yeah. Yes, synth at 0 and then the sub at like -3. But I could probably even push it more. Do you make other genres like D&B? Yeah, I do. I make some drum and bass. You'll know a tune, I'll show it at the end, but hopefully you've seen a tune on my Instagram called Kamikaze, which is like one of the main tunes I've actually ended up finishing, drum and bass. But yeah, I'll show you some other tunes at the end, but I've made some 140 stuff as well recently, just to when you're in a block, it's just nice to make something else. Just to keep everything good. Right, so they're the synths. And we've been through the drums mostly. And the rest of this tune is based around the effects and this sample here. So, don't know why, I just sort of thought one night this is what I'm going to use, because I don't know how it hasn't been really used already. And I thought it would be a sick way to get this tune going. So I've just taken the original synth, stretched it so it's in time of 128, and just had it play out until the breakdown. and then I've just basically messed around with it. So what have I got going on? So I've got some automation of EQ here. So it's just normal, and then into the build-up, I've just repeated bits. Yeah, and probably pitched it as well, I think. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this one. And then as it gets closer and closer to the drop, I am taking out the low end and even more reverb. But yeah, it's just amazing like what you can do from one sample. I don't like using more than what I need to. And yeah, that just worked for this. And then underneath that, I've got a lower version. Just emphasising that main melody. And that's probably doing the same thing. Yeah, a very similar thing. Just adding to the tension into the build-up. All 142. Any tips on not overthinking literally everything whilst producing? For example, like sound selection, which notes. I think it was Redlight that said, like, realistically, 99% of people that listen to your tunes won't care about how the kick sounds or like how little bits sound like that. So I think just thinking from a listener's point of view, who doesn't know exactly how much work's gone into it, there's no point overcomplicating stuff. Like, if it works, it works. And no one's going to judge you for how much you've done. I'm super hyped for your DMB tunes. Thank you. How do you approach your breakdowns? Breakdown wise, I just rely, I think of samples that go well, because my theory's not great and I don't want to start using chords and stuff. I rely on how can I process a sample in a weird way and make the most out of it. So from this one sample, I've managed to get a build up, a breakdown and a build from that without really anything else supporting it. It's just those two there. So if I'm stuck in this topic, but what is your mixdown process if you're sensitive? So yeah, so I'm not mastering my tune. So I start off, as the first thing I do is put a sausage fattener on my master, and that's just limiting everything anyway. So if I'm playing it, I'll go through it all, and I'll see how high I can push my sub before it starts sounding shit. So then you get everything as loud as it can do already. But yeah, it's not the right way to go about it, but it works for me, and yeah, that's how I do it. But yeah, don't worry about how, like, numbers in particular. Like, it doesn't really matter if something's at -3 or -2. But I like to have my kick and my sub and my synth be the loudest things in my mix, because that's what people were there to like listen to. That's the main thing they want to hear. And then you base everything else around the levels of the kick and the synth and the sub. But yeah, I hope that helps. And then the rest of it is I've gone through the film. This is what I normally do. I'll go through like movie quotes and stuff. So this is all from the good, the bad and the ugly. And I've gone through and I've taken so many snippets out. And that's pretty much how I've got all the effects in this tune. So what's this one here? This one is...
You're the son of 1,000 fathers, all bastards like you.
Yeah, so this is just the build-up section.
You're the son of 1,000 fathers, all bastards like you.
Similar thing, basically. I've got an echo boy on here. Pro Q, sausage fattener, which you can see in this project I don't use a lot at all. It's just if I'm feeling really lazy and I want to limit something hard, I'll use a sausage fattener. And then I'm using Echo Boy, just really wet, because I didn't want this to be the focus. I just wanted it to be something that builds you into the next part of the song. So it's really wet. Yeah, and that's just really filling up the stereo width. So you see it's really wide. And it's got a lot of feedback, so it's just really filling up that area. Even though it's such a simple effect, really. Is Night Bass in-house engineer mastering your tunes in the EPs? Yeah, I did. I think on my first EP that was mastered by them. Just because I didn't really know what I was doing, like sausage fattener wise. But my last EP, the Supreme one, was all sausage fattened. Yeah, all of it. And they don't care about that. But if you need it mastered, they do. Yeah, so that's that sample. And then from the same YouTube video that I got these from, I've got the main vocal, which is this.
You smell like a pig already.
Just a really dark vocal. And this is having a lot of processing on it. So by itself, it just sounded like this. Just really dry.
You smell like a pig already.
And then probably higher pitched as well. So like with my effects and stuff, I like to do as much as I can with delays and reverb and stuff to make it sound different. I use echo a lot now, just to fill up areas that in an easy way. So Pro Q, Decapitator again, and then Hyperdimension, so just adding more width to the vocal. More Pro Q, just taking out areas.
Like a pig already.
Echo Boy again, just adding more ping pong delay basically on the sides.
You smell like a pig already.
Yeah, and then it allows it to bleed into the drop as well, just tying the two areas together. And then throughout the drop it comes back in other ways. Yeah, all going through the same bus. And then on the actual pre-drop, so here,
You smell like a pig already.
I'm adding a harmonic here, which has been processed in like a really different way. So this one's got a ring mod on it, yeah. And then it's also been pushed really hard into the sides of the mix. So you've got this dry one
You smell like a pig.
in the mono, and then you've got this one filling the sides.
You smell like a pig already.
Yeah. Did the inspiration for this track come from the movie song and quote, or did you drop in mid-track? So this one actually started with the sample. That's just what got me the inspiration for this. And then the vocals just came halfway through. I was looking for a vocal for it. And I thought taking something from the actual movie would be the best way to like honour the sample. While producing, do you vision the tune playing in a club? Yeah, 100%. So this is a weird one, but I've got a master chain, probably called like Festival Tent or something. Here we go, the Festival Tent test. And it's literally just a reverb and an EQ, so it just sounds like it's in a festival tent. And then I'll listen to it through that, and then it's so much easier to hear. Like, is it going to sound big enough, and is it going to sound like epic enough to cover that sort of space? So yeah, I always continually, all the time, I'm thinking, how will this go down in a club? How will this go down if you're listening at home? So yeah, just trying to keep it good for everyone that's listening. Okay, last question. On my mix down, I promise low. You get the sub and the kick synth at clip level, then readjust figures. Yeah, so my drums are always going to be the loudest thing, pretty much, and that's what I'll start on. And then I'll work around the drums with everything else. The effects you just have to be subtle with, like they don't need to be loud. But your main elements of your song, I have loud. Yeah, and then I work everything else and just adjust as I go. And yeah, it just sort of works if you go about it that way. Where from you took the movie samples? It's literally from a top 10 quotes of the film. So on YouTube. And I've gone through and I just cut out loads. So I've got other sound effects in here as well. I'm sure. 1 minute. Yeah, so all sorts of weird sounds from that. Yeah. But like just using that sample to its full potential really, without having to then go looking for another one. But you can get so much from a small sample. What else have I got going on? So when I'm thinking about my tune, effects wise, I'm thinking what's the theme of it and where can I expand on that theme? So as it's like a Wild West theme song, I thought, okay, horses like neighing and like trotting and stuff. So I've got one name there, and then just another like way to incorporate the horses and the Wild West thing into this song. They're probably not got any processing on at all, just more Pro Q. So yeah, the effect stuff I don't really worry about as much. Like small stuff like that, you just have to take the lows out and you can leave it as it is, as it's not important. It's just in the background. Can you show the Festival 10 plugins, please? Yeah, I would show it to you. I'll show it to you at the end, but it would take these off if I load it in. So I'll do that at the end. Untakeable copyright sample is this track now. Yeah, literally the whole tune is based around that sample, which is a shame. It's a shame. It's a good thing at the same time. It will make a good unreleased tune, I guess, for sets. Sounds inspiring. I want away from FL. Oh, that's great to hear. Cheers. Excuse me. Some people say, leave everything at -6, and I don't. It's such a cringy thing to say, but break the mold and don't listen to rules. But you'll probably listen to half the stuff I'm saying. Why is he doing that? And it's just the way that I've sort of got around stuff in a lazy way and making stuff as easy as possible. And just having the sub as loud as it is just makes the tune heavier. So why not have it louder? And when you're using a limiter from the start, having a sausage phantom in the master, you can tell when the sub is just too loud because it will start clipping. Yeah, exactly. If it works, it works. Yeah. So some stuff I'm fairly useful with effects and stuff. I'm quite clever with that. But then some stuff I'll do what I need to do, and that's it. And if it sounds good enough, then that's all you really need, because there's so many parts to a song. And you don't hear 90% of the stuff. People focus on this main synth, and then everything else is just small little ear candy stuff that most people won't even listen to. But yeah, this is most of the song. What else have I got? I've got this slap sound here, just chopping up more drum samples. So this one was good. I do this quite a lot now. This is in a tune called Dodge This as well. I've used the same slap sound. So you've got these 8 bars here, and then just to bring you into that next 8 bars, it sucks you into it with this sample. Yeah. Which I thought really added to that. And then you just got a lot more basic effects. Just loads of delays and everything. But you'll see my drums are completely dry again. There's no reverb on them. And there's not a lot of reverb on this either, I think. Although there might be. Maybe. But yeah, the contrast between the two is important for this track. Yeah. I think that's most of the song that's actually worth talking about. If there's anything you want me to go through in particular, or if you didn't quite catch, let me know. You've got any questions? Boss says, cheers, man. Do you have any tips on ear candy making the tune sound more interesting? With ear candy stuff, it was actually my tunes were sounding really dull. And I think it was Holy Goof that mentioned ear candy, and he taught me sort of basic stuff. And he used the example of car keys, so that's what he layers with a hi-hat, for example. And it's just using everyday sounds and odd sounds that you get, just to make stuff sound more creative and different. And you just got to think, where are the hits that need to be emphasised? So with the slap, for example, I thought that hit needed to just be really pushed forward, and I thought that slap just added to it. Again, it's just using sounds that you wouldn't normally think of using in an interesting way. Yeah, going through splice for stuff like that and then stretching it makes it sound pretty much. If you stretch a sample, it will make it sound way darker and more spooky. So that's what I do for most of my stuff. But yeah, I think with what I found for making tracks is you need to spend time on the stuff that really matters, and then the stuff that is further in the background and takes less time, so don't spend as much time on, because the important thing is the melody and the synth, and everything else just sort of comes with it. If you're feeling the vibe and it's all just coming naturally, you'll just finish the tune and it will come up better because you're spending less time worrying about little things. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. So yeah, hopefully you'll see this tune at some point in the future. We'll see. All good. It's time to be super solid. Yeah, hopefully that's helped all of you in some sort of way. If you've got any questions as well, I'll be happy to answer them. I hope to play this tune in the future. I hope this is a release. Yeah, me too. I'll show you before I go. I'll show you a few different things that I make. So just to show that you can sort of make loads of other things. You don't have to stick to one thing. And you can hear probably my sound still through this. So yeah, this is the 140 thing that I was making. So yeah, that's just some like silly thing that I was making the other day in a couple of hours, just 140 stuff. And then, how did you come up with the name Nubass?
Make your music stand out, get more views, and way more engagement. Bring your music to life. Get Music Visualizer. In every format, even for social media. Get started today. The link is in the description.
Nice. Yeah, you did see a Holy Goof collab. That's something that's been worked on. Getting there. But I won't share that just yet because it needs a lot of work. Yeah, the whole 140 and D&B stuff, it's put me off releasing it because it's not Nubass sounding, and like the most people that are listening to my stuff won't enjoy it. So yeah, I think that is important. Like, your brand is your brand, and even though you make other stuff, you have to be realistic with what most people want to hear. And even though it's good to like stretch yourself as a producer, the majority of the people, career-wise, will not want to hear that. They'll just want to hear tunes that they enjoy, and that's why they follow you, really. So yeah, it's just finding that balance, I think. Why'd you pick Nubass? Can you share how you come up with your brand? So Nubass actually came from, so my name's Ben, and then my best mate when we started it is called Nathan, and we just started like just making silly mixes, and like I've still got like I'll show you my first tune. Which I've still got. I always keep my first tunes because it's quite important to like look back on where you started, and it's quite encouraging to see, I guess. But yeah, so Nu for Nathan and then bass for Ben. It just sort of like worked at the time. We just did it at school. Yeah, that's how Nubass sort of came out as a name. Oh, don't tell me this is crashed. Oh, right, I'll have to get the things up here. Hopefully I've still got my first tunes on my computer. I think it was this is one of my first tunes here. So yeah, this is made 4 years ago. So yeah, it doesn't sound great at all. But yeah, I guess it shows progress. Yeah, I'll show you Kamikaze quick as well. So this is drum and bass I was working on. So yeah, just really heavy drum and bass. But yeah, that's like good just for sound design, just to see different ways you can use sounds. And I'll show you the Hot Goods collab as well. Can find it. The Supreme. I'll show you the Supreme VIP as well. Quickly.
Supreme weapons.
So yeah, that's the Supreme VIP. That's the first time I've like showed it to anyone, and no idea what I'm going to do with that. But yeah, that will be like shown off soon, I guess. And this is the Hot Goods tune. Glad you like the Supreme VIP. Cheers, guys. Yeah, the VIP you heard of Supreme is actually the Hoda remix, bootleg sort of thing that he did for his own sets. So yeah, that's the old like VIP that you would know. Nubass and AC Slater, yeah, hopefully we're getting on that like soon. Cheers. I'm really happy with the stuff I'm coming out with now and like the stuff I've got to release. It's just getting everything lined up really. This is the next release I've got coming out on the archives, which is Nubass and Deps, called Gangsters.
Gangsters.
So yeah, that's coming out in early October. Sean Dean, yeah, the Sean Dean colour came out recently as well. Different version to how it actually came out eventually. Originally it had Triller on it as well, which was sick. So it's like the same. This verse is so good.
I'm so the G, I'm so the star. Getting controlled, man, know what I want. I can spare man, me a check back now talk. You don't know it's that 0121 boss, man, rips that 0121 hard. You know my 01.
But yeah, sadly that didn't end up coming out quite the same. Trying to think what else I've got. So yeah, this is my next release, like in general. This is coming out in a couple of days actually. The zero sidechain in your sub makes me so much. Yeah, you can hear it like more and more in my tunes. I only sidechain if it's absolutely needed. But like if you use the EQ like cleverly and you make sure they're just not clashing in other ways, you don't always have to sacrifice the actual power that you lose with a sidechain. And this is Titanic, which is the next tune I've got coming up.
It's just a big monstrous thing, and you're out at sea. It's just
So yeah, more techy that one, and using like more like roller synths, which probably came originally from a D&B tune that I was making. So yeah, that's why it's important to like make other stuff as well, because you get inspiration from that. I think what else I've got. I've got Drinks on Me curl up here, which hopefully we will end up releasing. We're just trying to sort that out now.
second. Get it in, no second. Get it in, no second. Get it in, no second. No second. Get it in, no second.
Yes, that's Drinks and Me collab as well. Is this the same process and concept for the sub? Yeah, my sub's always pretty much the same. But unless it's something like a weird sub, if it's just a normal sub, it will be the same process that I've shown you today. For the tech track, so I was making a tech track earlier today. I'll show you quick. But you'll see, like, this is the very basics of when I start making a tune. This will be how I go about it. Cheers, Chris. So yeah, this was literally just, I was messing around with loops and trying to get some sort of sound out of this today. So it doesn't sound good at the moment, but it's got ideas there. So started off with drums. Yeah, just normal drums there, and then this is just really basic. It's not actually the same version. The last version was more techy, but yeah, more sound design sort of stuff. Just getting like basic ideas through with that. But yeah, the last version's more subby, I guess. Although I don't know if I still have that version. But yeah, with tech stuff, you just have to prioritise the drums way more. I do anyway. So these drums could easily be turned into like a tech tune. And then I've got the sub here. But yeah, the same sort of stuff. It's even being processed at the moment. Number 8. Yeah, Pro Q3 this time, but same thing. Just a sub by itself, sine wave. Or a square maybe. Yeah, square this time. But yeah, the same thing. Less drive. MPH collab would slap so hard. Yeah, me and MPH need to work on something. That'd be sick. How do you approach building your sets for live shows? Can you show us that lead? Which one do you mean? You mean the long one or the sort of bad sounding little one? This one. For live sets, I will make a new one for every single show, and then if I'm sent any music throughout that week or something, I'll prioritise playing that, and then I'll have my set plays, like set songs that I'll play in every set at the moment. The more crowd pleasing ones, and then my own tunes, and then I'll prioritise the new tunes that I've been sent in the last week. So then the sets are always fresh, and you're always playing like the newest stuff. The last one. So this one. This is just simple again, but not using basic shapes this time. Using something Squelchy FM. So yeah, same sort of thing. 4 voices, FM. But yeah, really basic. A little bit of no hyperdimension actually. A little bit of detune, and then distortion, and that main synth is more like a roller sort of synth. But yeah, 2 saws that time. Show festival temp plugins. Yeah, I'll show you the festival temp plugin section. So yeah, so like eventually I'll get a tune finished. Okay, I'll show you this one. This is a techie sort of tune. This is how it sounds.
2, 1, gets you through.
Yeah, pick up my phone line down. Pick up my phone line down. Yeah, pick up my phone line down. Phone line down. Yeah, pick up my phone line down. Pick up my phone line down. Yeah, pick up my phone line down.
2, 1, gets you through.
Yeah, pick up my phone line.
And I'll just sort of mess around with it.
Pick up my phone line down. Yeah, pick up my phone line down. Phone line. Yeah, pick up my phone line.
Like really boost the sub, because that's all you get in a tent. A little bit of distortion. You can just get a sense of like the space more with the reverb, and then yeah, boost some of the highs and just boost some of the lows and get rid of the highs, and you can just sort of hear how it's going to sound like reverberating around a tent. But yeah, this is probably the last song I actually finished.
Hello?
Yeah, that's just a little thing I do. It's quite useful to get a sense of how it would sound somewhere else. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I'm glad the internet's held out for the second half, mostly. Yeah, got any final questions, I'll go through them. But yeah, hopefully that's helped a lot. And you can see like simple stuff isn't always bad, I guess. Do you start with the drums in Tech House? So yeah, so I'll quickly show this '09 gang tune if you want. See, look, this one here, sound design ideas. I don't know what's in that, but I'll just make a project and I'll just go through sound designing for a bit. Phone line gang, here we go. But yeah, with tech, with any tune really, I'll always start with the drums, because without the drums, you can't really get a feel of how it's going to sound. And if you're just blindly making sounds with no actual context of where it's going to go, it's really difficult to see how it's going to transform into a tune. Awesome, Ben. Thank you. No worries. Thank you. Definitely going to be smart. Yeah. Good luck. Like, if you need any feedback and stuff, DM me on Instagram, or not so much on Facebook. But yeah, DM me on Instagram, Nubass UK, and I get a lot of people do that anyway, and I'll try and give some feedback in some way. Same process on the '09 gang sub. I'd guess so. I'll open it up now. But yeah, I finished this one 2 or 3 days ago, maybe. What are common mistakes when you get demos? That's a really good question. So when I'm getting demos for like the archives, for example, or like just to play out, the ones that I instantly just turn off are the ones that use samples that I've heard in Splice. I just can't. I know people say like don't worry about using presets and stuff, but for this sort of music, where it's not like EDM and like it's more underground, and your sound comes from the way you sound design and the way you process stuff differently. And if you're just taking a sound off Splice, for example, that Taiki New like stab sort of sound, where is it? It literally haunts me, because as soon as it comes out, like on a tune, I just switch off. That one, my God, every time. And as soon as that plays, I'm just like, no. So yeah, using sounds that everyone uses. I think not having like an intricate like effects section is really off-putting when it's just like basic drums and like maybe some white noise, but there's no actual ear candy that gives the tune its own unique feel. It doesn't stand out to me. It's not something that I'd personally want to sign, because in the nicest way possible, you're going to be making better stuff in a couple of months' time, and I want to push the people that are like sort of on their, like they're just making sick tunes, but like that initial like learning curve is so massive, and the difference between when you've got ear candy and you've got a solid mix down to actually like when you're like you sound like basic, for example, and you're just learning, it doesn't take long for that to just click. And like when you see someone make a tune, even though if it's good, you just think I'd rather sign a tune that you make in a couple of months, because it's just going to be sick compared to what that is now. Yeah, I've heard it on a tune on Confession. Yeah, I know. Some people just use it. It doesn't really matter. But for me, everyone loves that Taika sound. Yeah. Best chance success. I mean, success is like it's how you define it, really. Like I wouldn't say I'm successful or anything, but like I've made a couple of tunes that have got onto decent labels, and I think just making good connections with people and just being nice to people, really, just making good relationships with people, making good tunes, and having something that's different about your sound compared to every other person is so important. How do you keep a tune interesting without relying on vocals? Well, I do rely on vocals to fill in gaps, but that's not the only way that you can do it. So you can use effects, for example, as well, or random clap samples, or just take out drums for a bit. So this was getting repetitive. This is the '09 gang tune, this one. So before, when I first came up with this idea, it didn't have any effects in it, so it was literally just the drums and that sub and the vocal, and I thought we needed something else just to give something else to that tune that's more unique. And then I looked through Splice for these phone sounds, and that just completely transformed the direction of this tune. So yeah, just adding like little things that follow the theme of the tune is really like what I do. So like with the Wild West theme one, you've got the horse in the background, you've got like the carts like trotting and stuff like that, which just adds to the overall theme. And I think having a theme that you base the whole tune around is so important. Any tips on how to find your own style sound? You don't need to find your own sound. The sound just finds you because you have preferences on how you like stuff to sound. And that just naturally comes. Like when people say, oh, how do you get like this Nubass sort of sound? It's not intentional at all. It's just the way I produce compared to someone else. Every person is different. So yeah, just don't try and force it. Just you'll have sounds that you like, and as long as you use it creatively, even if it's similar to someone else's, it will still sound like you. So with tech house, I keep hearing it all this time. So change your sub is. I think I have recently. I've been getting more into sidechain again. I go through phases of it, and I don't know if I am sidechaining this one. So this one is at -1 dB, the sub. And yeah, this one is being sidechained, but not massively, just really short sidechain. Because the kick's so massive in this. And when you listen to it together, it just needs it. But yeah, that's just the same sub as always. Although this one's using a different wavetable, so this one has more harmonics in it. So you get more of that like growl sort of sound up here. Which when a tune's as empty as this, when there's just a vocal and drums playing, you need that just to carry it more. Otherwise it would just sound really empty. Right, I reckon I'm going to leave it there. And if you've got any more questions, DM me or stuff on Instagram, and I'll try and answer them. Can I see the shaper box? Yeah, quickly I'll show you. Just yeah, really short sidechain on that. Do you sidechain your kicks heavy? You don't. I don't sidechain the kicks. No, you don't want the kick sidechain if that's what you mean. So usually have one synth and make it as fast as possible, process instead of layering a lot. Yeah, so I don't like layering. That Wild West tune was probably one of the only times I've ever layered synths. Oh, and this one to be fair. Two sounds here playing. Just two very strange sounds. How you make sounds like Rave Dragon lead? Probably a similar way to detuned saws. I think Zenworld did a tutorial on how to make it in one of his bass series things, and it was fairly close to how I did it. It wasn't identical, but you get the same sort of sound. You weren't talking a lot over time, bro. Yeah, yeah, I did. But yeah, after the internet troubles, I'm glad it's like held out for this bit.